Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be going over something I made for the CTM Divinity's End. It's the same map that I made the Void Return system for. The thing I'm going to be going over here is how I made the system for the Divine Item, Olympian Fire. Adri initially made a system to do this, but it was iffy at best in detecting some stuff, so he asked me to remake it, so I did. In this video, I'm going to be going over how I made it. But to start with, let's go over what it does. Basically, it's a lingering potion that when thrown gives you a recharging item, and then after about 5 seconds, it then gives you back the lingering potion. Another thing it has to be able to do is remove any duplicate clouds. So if you have the item and you use it again, it will remove any previous clouds that you've created. It does allow for multiple players to have the Olympian Fire and to have multiple clouds in the world at the same time, but only one per player, basically. The biggest sort of technical hurdle of this is detecting specifically when you use this item and not just like a generic lingering potion. It also has to be able to handle you switching to it immediately. This is sort of where Adri's version broke, is if you use it the second, or the tick that you switch to it, it'll break. And stuff like that. So I'm going to be going over how I got around all those technical hurdles. So at the core of this is the inventory changed advancement criteria. Basically, when this triggers, it will run this function. And this only updates this criteria here. It only revokes the throw criteria. If you've ever worked with an inventory changed advancement, you know that it spams errors if you don't have a base. Or if you don't know that, this is how you prevent that. So basically, whenever your inventory changes, this updates. Your inventory changes pretty regularly, but it also updates whenever you throw a potion. So if you throw a potion, it will also increment this score, because this is the used item lingering potion trigger. If it's 1 or greater, it knows that you've thrown a lingering potion. Then it runs this use check. For reference, after we run this, every time the player's inventory is updated, I count the amount of these Olympian Fire potions the player has on them and store it into the OF.count score. This is compared to a score right here that I store into current. And then if your count score is greater than the current, that means I know that the player has used an Olympian Fire lingering potion in that tick, or in the trigger, or in the advancement trigger of this, basically. This is so I can know for sure that a player has used it without having to check their main hand or offhand slot every tick and then counting. That sort of allows you to switch to it immediately, and if you throw it in the same tick that you switch to that slot, then you lose it. This prevents that. And then I just reset the use score after the use check here. So that's the main tech of this. I also have another thing right here that ends a cooldown. You'll see this right here where I add a tag instead of running a function. I'll get to that whenever I go over the loop function. So I add a tag to run a function later. If no player in the world has any cooldown and you have the cooldown item, it will end the cooldown. This basically makes it so if you throw it and then drop the potion item or try giving it to someone else, once your cooldown expires and they pick it up, it'll automatically switch it back over to the lingering potion item. This prevents losing the item to the cooldown item. And then at the end here, I say I revoke only the throw criteria. So this use check here, once it figures out that you've actually used it, it then runs this function, player/used, not use. I add a tag to the player to give back the item. This is the same thing where I add a tag here to end the cooldown. I'll go over that here in a bit. I also set their cooldown to 100 to set the cooldown to 5 seconds. And then I add a score here to I set the player's ID into a right score, and then I then run a function as the closest potion entity, which is the one that's thrown. I check for the specific custom potion effects that the item has, and then I limit to 1 and sort nearest, basically to find the entity that I used. Now, one thing that I do have to be able to do is carry over the ID of the player into the potion and then carry that back over to the area effect cloud that is spawned. So basically what I have to do is write the ID of the player into something that will then be written into the area effect cloud, which is duration, because the duration will always be 1 afterwards. Let's actually step back a sec into the loop function. On all area effect clouds, I run this function here, AEC tick, and then if the entity isn't tagged yet, I then run this function. I write the duration that I wrote here into the ID of the area effect cloud, and then I just write the duration to 1. Since the duration will always be 1, I can write whatever integer I want into the duration value as the ID, and then I can revert it back to 1 afterwards. And then I just write some data into it, and this does this is all the setup here, and then I also kill all area effect clouds, the Olympian Fire, that have the same score as what I wrote into the right score. Because as you can see right here, I grab the ID of the entity and then write it into this, and then kill all entities with the same ID. So that's how I prevent duplicate IDs. And then right here in the loop, I also run something on all players. This is the cooldown function. This basically just counts down every tick, and then if they're at 0 and they have the cooldown item, I end the cooldown. But also I have these 2 tags that I shown earlier, which give items. Now, the reason I have the tag to run later is if you run a give or replace item command directly off of the advancement function trigger, it will create a ghost item. So I have to basically add a tag or a score or something to a player to run in the actual game tick instead of the advancement tick, because it's weird and it's just problematic. So to prevent all that, I just have these advancement function calls basically. So that more or less covers everything I had to do to carry over numbers into area effect clouds, as well as determining if a player is throwing a specific lingering potion instead of just another non-specific lingering potion. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will catch you all next time.